So our project is on Japan's imperialism of Korea. It took place from 1910 to 1945, and it's because Japan wanted to expand their empire. Although they had a shortage of raw materials, very little evidence exists to support that Japan acquired its colonies between 1894 and 1910 for raw materials. Although Korea and Taiwan provided rice to Japan, especially in poor harvest years, very little of Japan's annual imports came from the colony. And this is a picture of the workforces in Korea at the time.
Okay, so moving on, we have some key figures in the imperialism of Korea. The first of these is Cho Nam-seon, and he was a leader of the March 1st movement, which was a non-violent Korean anti-Japanese colonialism group. So they were against the Japanese, and you can actually see here in Seoul in Korea was where the March 1st movement began. And he was a prominent historian and poet, and he actually drafted the Korean Declaration of Independence, which he was then arrested and imprisoned for until 1921. Next we have Ryu Gwansun, and she was an organizer in the March 1st movement, and she planned a demonstration for independence in the southwest region of Korea, where about 2,000 people protested, many were arrested, and her parents were even killed by Japanese police. She died in prison as a result of torture, but she was released, and she was a big part in inspiring the movement in other parts of Korea. Her final words were, "Even if my fingernails are torn out, my nose and ears are ripped apart, and my legs and arms are crushed, this physical pain does not compare to the pain of losing my nation. My only remorse is not being able to do more than dedicating my life to my country." And this is a pretty good summation of how many anti-Japanese Koreans felt at the time. Next, we have Emperor Seonjong, who was the Emperor of Korea at the time, and he actually refused to sign the treaty that was to be made to allow Korea to be annexed by the Japanese. And he was very anti-Japanese. And in the end, he was imprisoned once Japan did imperialize Korea, which was allowed by the Prime Minister Lee Wan-yong, who was actually for the Japanese imperialism, as he knew it would have some benefits for his country, even though in the end it did turn out poorly.
Okay, so some pros of imperialism was the rapid urban growth and expansion of commerce, and there were forms of mass culture such as radio and cinema. Industrial development also took place, which was encouraged by the Japanese colonial state for the purposes of enriching Japan and fighting the wars in China and the Pacific, rather than to benefit the Koreans themselves.
And however, there were many cons to the situation, probably way more that outweigh the pros. And as one can observe from this political cartoon, even though it was helping the Koreans in a way, the Japanese were still stepping all over them, and it wasn't really that fair of an agreement. So moving on, the cons are the cruel treatment of Koreans. Many Koreans were killed by the Japanese army and police at random, as one can see from this picture here of Koreans being killed by Japanese. And many were forced to integrate into Japanese culture in a very harsh way, which led to the destruction of Korean culture. Because many were forced to take Japanese names, they were extremely pressured by police to do so. They were forced to follow more Japanese cultural rituals and whatnot. And overall, Korean culture was very damaged by this whole entire movement. And some lasting effects of Japanese imperialism of Korea once they finally left in 1945 after World War II. Some effects are March 1st is still an important date in the calendar of South Korea because it marks the anniversary of the popular uprising in 1919 against Japanese imperialism. In South Korea, the anniversary is observed with a commemorative ceremony in which the president delivers a speech. And of course, there are the lasting effects from the industrialization and the technology that the Japanese brought to Korea. And also, there is still some tension between Japanese and Korea due to this terrible time in the history of both countries. And that is all we have, so hope you enjoyed learning.